来。那我们接下来请何副执行长来给我们带领接下来的综合座谈，感恩。
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the speakers and all the participants today. So we come to the stage of panel discussion. I hope that we can raise some question and we can share in our ideal and discussion, maybe debating as well. So the first question I want to raise is, what is religious history? What is the core for this history in compared to the other, social history, political history? What's the differences of religious history? I'm going to start from James. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I would start with the question of what is religion, and then I would stop asking that question because it's a very big question. And I would say religious history is a form of history, not necessarily depending on the definition of religion. In other words, we don't have to define religion to define religious history. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is that there are already within each tradition that identifies itself as a religion in some way, there are already historical sources, historical narratives, historical methods. There is a conversation within each religion about the past, the meaning of the past, the spiritual, moral significance of the past. And so, religious history, as opposed to, say, social history, cultural history, might be defined as the job of comparing the different stories about the past that each religious tradition has. As long as they define themselves as religions, we can accept that, right? Now, does Buddhism qualify within that definition? Because Buddhism is a complex phenomenon. It's a religious tradition, it's also a social movement phenomenon, a culture, has political aspects. So, is the history of Buddhism a religious history? Or is religious history just one aspect of the history of Buddhism, right? So these are the sorts of questions we could maybe begin to ask.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you. Well, this is quite, multiple dimension of religious history, including how the engagement with the society with a different sphere. Well, thank you, James. And Professor Lin?
Well, I would say it's kind of a follow-up to James. I think to me, because we have several colleagues who have the background of history department, so I think for historians who does history and who Buddhologists or religious scholars who does history, it is slightly different. The difference is because we ask different questions. So I think for historian, their question would be more historical, about the society, about the institution. They don't necessarily understand the core or the either doctrines or the true value of a religion. It's not their major concern, I think. So I think historiography is a sort of craft. It's an art, like how to do it. But to understand a religion deeply, that's something else. So I mean, a religious history, you need both. So you need the skills. You need to learn the technique, the necessary kind of, for example, how do we check sources? You need some training for that. But then to ask questions pertinent to a religion, then you have to receive another training from religious studies. Yeah, so that's what I think, those two are different. Okay, yeah.
Thank you. So maybe just to follow up and very much second some of the suggestions here. I think we might want to think of how to differentiate between religious history and history of religion. And for me, as someone that is not specifically engaging with religion as is, but rather with specific community, I see religious history as our history, a history that somebody writes on a community that they might identify with, that they want to write, almost like a familial history, in contrast to some sort of an external view that people would define, describe what they see the phenomena. This is a very much an internal view of something that you care very much about and something that you might care less about ideas of truth, ideas of objectivity, as much as the idea of the core beliefs that I see, and I want to learn more about myself through that kind of practice. So that is for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Will. Yeah.
我可以用中文吗？我用中文简短。Can you try this? Okay. Can I? 我觉得在基督宗教的研究当中，历史一直是一个很重要的主题。那教会的历史学家在教会的历史当中，他必须要学会判断什么是宗徒传统。那所以在延续宗徒传统的精神上面，他们要来确定这个教会的历史是符合宗徒传统以及圣神的带领的。那在历史的延续当中，教会也必须去找寻圣灵在教会的历史当中所发现的旨意。所以研究教会历史也是在研究神在人类的历史当中如何显现自己的旨意。这是为什么我刚刚在演讲当中提到，在天主教会里面，我们非常重视传统，因为在传统当中，神会把自己的旨意显现出来。也因此，历史事实上不仅仅是人为的，更也是神的旨意的一种彰显。简单的回复，谢谢。
So I think that my friend here said very wise things, and as a historian, I could say that yes, it is absolutely the different questions that we ask. It is also the sources that we look at, and what we want to understand from the sources. So you want to understand the historical context, you want to understand the conditions, you want to understand how the society was practicing, understanding, thinking, transitioning, but at the same time, we also saw here today 6 different approaches and thoughts already about the question, and I don't really think that we can separate. I don't think you can do history of religion or religious history without understanding the text that you're reading, and the opposite. But I think it is a question of emphasis and what you're looking at. Historians, oftentimes, they're looking for to track a change, to track like a transformation. That sometimes helps in thinking and defining. But I also must say that those disciplinary categories, I think they're really limited. They're limiting us. Oftentimes in academia, they serve to hire jobs and to understand where a person is suitable or not. And I think we should definitely cross the boundaries and the disciplines and collaborate, not just understanding other religions, but also understanding other methods and the different sources that we're looking at.
Not conclusion, but we sum up all the discussion is about 2 things. It's content and context. 内容跟脉络。The content means that particular religious community, what happened in their dharma, and their founder, the follower, all about the internal activities, and we record it. This is content. But context is like James said, that you relate to the society, the specific arrow, right? The arrow, the societal situation, political situation will impact you. So that's also context. So the two sides, content and context, will be equally important for the history of religion and religious history. And the thing is that as Dr. Suzuki from Japan, he's a great Zen master, he said that all the history of Buddhism is not about what Buddha say, is not about the development of Buddhist Dharma for the last 2,000 more years. It's not about the critical event happened in the last 2,000 more years. The history of Buddhism is individual journey to reach the spiritual enlightenment. That's saying that eventually all the Dharma, all the Gospels, all the wisdom is toward to self-enlightenment. That's the key for the history of religion. But there's a very different, very important question is how we define the core of religion, like a God, the God's will in the history. Or how we perceive Buddha, is a God? Is he a saint? Or he is just like a great man? It's very important to perceive the founder or the core of the religion. Now, how we perceive Dharma Master. Is she is only extraordinary leader? Or she is a saint? Or she is a Buddhahood? You were really determining how you depict, how you describe the history of Tzu-chi, or history of Master Chang, or the history of Jesus Christ, or the history of Muhammad. So, can you say something about that? How we perceive the core of every religion. The core could be God, could be one founder, like a Jesus Christ, like a Muhammad, like a Dharma Master Buddha. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Her. You spoke just now about content and context. Yes. And I think that's very helpful because you first asked us about what is religious history. Well, that is about context. That is about how scholars who study history from different points of view, who are part of a professional discipline with certain methodologies, sources, conventions, how they think about religious phenomena within the broader context of a time, a place, a society. But now you're asking us about content, about what inside the religion is the core of the religion, what really matters inside the religion, and how to write a history of a religion based on that content, based on the story of that content, whether it's the Dharma, whether it's the life of a leader, or something else. So I think in Judaism, I argue today that the content is an argument about what the content is, okay? Now, maybe I think that because, I'm a postmodern person and this is normal for us to look at things this way. Maybe I think that because I'm a certain type of American Jew who was brought up to believe that Judaism is, open to different definitions because we were in the diaspora, very far from the land of Israel. There are many reasons why I may have that, that view, and that view might be wrong. And as you say, it's important to write a history that makes it possible for you to be wrong and for other people to disagree with you, which, again, reinforces my argument. The content of Judaism, if there is such a thing, if there is a core, right, I think we need to write a history of that in a way that respects that it will change over time, and that it has changed over time, and that that's not necessarily a bad thing. That Jews themselves may believe at one point in time that the content of Judaism is one thing, and at another point in time that they may believe it is another thing. And not to write a history in a way that forces those two stories about Judaism into the same story and allows them to be different stories, maybe side by side, and looking for connections between them, looking for relationships between them. So this might seem very abstract, but just to give you an example.
Wow, it's an amazing answer, right? The argument itself is the argument of content is the core content of religion, and that keeps this religion quite open to every possibility. So we can argue in what is God, we can argue in what is Judaism, and keep going this kind of debating and argument. We'll keep it alive for the Judaism to adapt to different environment and different era. I think this is a very good statement. And so continue, Professor, and what you think about the core of every religion, no matter it's a Dharma, a founder, or a God?
Okay. Well, my answer is very simple. Study. You should study. So the easiest way, the quickest way would be you go to, for example, my institute to study. Or you can study in a monastics, or you can study, for example, at慈济. Then you understand that religion, you know. But yeah, so I think one has to be keen to know, and then when he's keen to know, he must study. Yeah, not just sit there. Okay, but this is, I think, regarding the attitude. A second thing is from a Buddhist perspective, from a Mahayana Buddhist perspective, I think the most important thing, the core of Buddhism would be practice. So I mean, the language, the text, they are important, but you shouldn't limit your, I mean, because the context must be changing all the time. So what was important was written during the time when the text was composed. But then how it will be interpreted in the future, it will be different. So we have this sense, I mean, like postmodern, we already have this kind of understanding of things about reinterpretation and the changing of context. So when you read the text, you really have to put yourself back to the context of the people and to understand that you are different. You have a different context of people who compose the text. So you are always in the change of not fixed your understanding of one single thing. You need to know, you have to be flexible, you have to be humble, you need to accept, tolerate more interpretations of the same thing. Okay, yeah.
Follow the doctrine become a dogma, not fixed. Or so continue this conversation, Dror.
I would like maybe also to follow up on this, so and to try to get it a step ahead. So, for me, religion is a study, is something that we do for the sake of studying. The actor that does the study is the self, is myself. Which means that the whole endeavor of what I'm trying to know is actually me. And in that regard, the interpretations, the relevance to whatever I'm going to study will be in many ways attempts to understand my own world using my own skills, my own questions, my own mysteries in the world through the prism of, you know, some imagined subject that I'm there. And in that regard, you know, for me, studying any religion, whether it is in many ways dealing with my own personal problems, mysteries, questions, and trying to find answers in stories, in images, in all sorts of meaning-generating tools, but it's always me in some ways, so a bit narcissistic, but still, hopefully.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I would like to also follow up with Dr. Lin's answer. For me, the answer is quite easy and also simple. It's spirituality. 在我自己的研究当中，教会的脉络的核心，刚刚和老师在询问，这个基督宗教的核心是什么？我觉得是神的旨意。那如何发现这个神的旨意？如何知道神在历史当中显现他的旨意？我觉得是研究教会历史的人必须要从灵修着手，也就是基督徒必须要在灵修生活当中学习分辨神的旨意是什么。那在自己的生活的情境当中，把在经书当中认识的神的话语，把它在自己的生活当中实现出来。这是我回应刚刚何老师说 content and context。content 对圣经对基督徒来讲是圣经里面的神的语言、神的话语、耶稣的教导，但是 context 是我们每一天活的生活。所以在我们的生活当中，把神的语言活出来，这个是基督信仰的核心。活出来，按照神的旨意把它活出来。但是如果没有灵修生活，这个会很难，因为每一天都在忙着处理世俗的事情。所以基督徒很重要的认识信仰的核心的方式，认识神的旨意的方式，是要有很好的灵修生活。最后，我用依纳爵神操的一个宗旨来回应今天的这个问题，就是在万物万事当中找寻神的面容，也就是我们相信神在所有的人间角落当中都在彰显他自己，也就是在所有的 context 当中，我们都可以找到神的话语。以上，谢谢。
Nataly.
Thank you. For me, it's actually a very difficult question. But I'd like to, I was inspired by Professor Lin's thought about practice, because practice is also something that is continuously changing. And I think that is very important to understand. But I'm thinking about core, and I'm thinking from within Buddhist teachings and from within Buddhist philosophy. And while you were guys talking, I was listening, and I was also thinking, do we have a singularity within the language of Buddhist teaching? And it's very difficult to think about. We have the 5 skandhas, we have the 3 treasures, we have the 8 consciousness, we have the dependent origin. We don't even have like one origin, maybe emptiness, but then emptiness is vast, is endless. And so I wonder if when we think about Buddhism, if we can think about a core in such a way. But I did relate to what you said about practice in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, Buddha, in some sutra, saying that if I make some rule that may not suitable for specific region and arrow, you can abandon it. If some rule that I never mentioned but is suitable for specific region and arrow, you should adopt that, which means flexibility, adaptive to different environment, also cultural continuity. As we're saying, like St. Paul, using the methodology of Greek to persuade the Greek about the Jesus Christ. Like you're saying, that open debate, open dialogue, that continue to adapt the new environment and to really reveal the core belief. So two questions, but can join one is that what's the quality of the writer who intend to write the history of religion? That is maybe Professor Chang being given the answer that spirituality, reflection, pure heart is very important. And yet, with a pure heart, you have to know the society. You have to engage in society, which means that you have to keep yourself impure, but also really understand the society need. Religion cannot answer the societal need. The religion may come, because the society, does not need you. So the third question will be, how can a writer, inside or outside, what is the quality of the writer? What kind of element that the religious writer need to write the history of religion? Thank you.
Thank you. I will only speak about the example of Judaism, and at the end I will ask you how this compares or differs from your own task in writing about Buddhism. In Judaism, there is a paradox, because while we said, and it's true, that Judaism is very open to dialogue, debate, different points of view. On the other hand, Jews have always been minorities in the societies where they lived. Small minorities, usually without very much power, and subject to tremendous persecution throughout their entire history. And so, it's one thing to say, oh, we're here on a panel, we're having a nice conversation. We can have some debate and dialogue. It's another thing to say, we can give up on Judaism because, we've debated so much we forgot what Judaism was, and meanwhile, our people were conquered, taken over, killed, right? So Jewish writers of Jewish history, feel a strong responsibility to keep the community together, even as they have to allow for debate and dialogue. And that is very hard, very, very hard to do. So how do they do it? The example I used was the rabbis who created Judaism as we still know it today. The authorities, the teachers around the time of Jesus who created the religious Jewish canon. That is still very important. And they understood their role as translators, not only as writers or authors, but as translators in a conversation between God and the Jewish people. And their responsibility was to translate that conversation faithfully, not to say what God said, because that's not something they can really know, right? What they can do is help the people to make sense of God's message, which is a different job. And so the point then is to remind the Jewish people what the essential elements of that message are, right? What the signal is, despite all of the noise of different interpretations and history and all of these challenges. And even though there's debate and there's dialogue, that it's very structured. It's crafted around particular problems which define Jewish identity. Problems like, what can we eat? Who can we marry? Where can we live? What is true, right? These are not trivial problems. These are problems that define a community, okay? So the rabbis were translators who were faithful to the messages that they had received from their tradition and who did their best to make them intelligible to the Jewish people and allow them to speak back in that conversation. But crucially, they also chose which problems were relevant. And that, I think, is the essence of the task of writing about the past in Judaism. Thank you.
Thank you. Continue, Professor Lee.
Okay, I think, I mean, if you ask me what is a good writer, what a good writer should be in the past, like pre-modern times, it is very different from now, right? Now we are in the age of like internet, AI, and since we got in Wikipedia, everyone can write something, contribute something on the internet to the knowledge. So for now, if we are talking about now, like for you, all of you, the volunteers here, I would say the first thing is you should write. You must write in good Chinese. If you don't have a good Chinese, if you write something in Chinese, but your language is not understandable, no matter what kind of superb idea you have, no one can understand you. So I think language is the most important thing. We have very talented students in Chang Da, but their Chinese is bad. So I think this is something we should really be careful about the language capability. Okay, the second thing is you must write something correct. But don't worry about, I mean, the point is don't make things up. So if you write, if you give the true information, perhaps sometimes our memory is not so reliable, but just write what you think it was correct. Don't make it up. Then it will be very valuable. Let me just give an example of a pre-modern, I mean, it's a pre-modern writer, a Japanese monk who went to China during the 9th century, Iee-Ming, 猿人入唐求法寻离行记. Okay, so he wrote a diary when he was in China. The book became very valuable, a source valuable for historians and for religious scholars. Part of it was because he detailed everything that he saw. And some information you cannot find in the standard history in China. For example, he would write how much is a bunch of tea, like a bag of tea, a bag of rice. That kind of thing maybe for ordinary Chinese people, they think it's not important. But 500 years later, they became very important information. So I think you can write as much as you want if they are true information. And then if your language is fluent, yeah, okay, so that's what I thought.
Dror? Yeah, just maybe to add a few ideas. There are different ways of writing history, and in many ways it's connected to the aim or to the objective of the specific reader, specific author. For me, myself, a good writer is a writer that first of all takes as his archive the most inclusive archive that he can. I like history that is inclusive, that give voices to everyone in some ways. History that is not history of heroes that I cannot connect to, because then, if I want to learn something from that, learning about big names, big people that are not me, will be maybe a way of veneration, but not something that I can make practical lessons from. So a good writer is a writer that beyond, the style that can be engaging, that we heard, and inspiring, is someone that gives voices to various parts of societies, various people, because there are different readers that need to read this kind of work. So in some ways, this is for me the most crucial thing. And just to go back maybe to my answer for the other question, since it is very much myself, I see a good writer, someone that actually can explicitly bring himself into the writing, despite the big temporal, geographical gap with the subject. The readers want to learn about the history just as much as they want to read or to learn about the author of the history. So I think those are points that, for me at least, make a good history writing. So yeah, okay, thanks.
No, I know the time is running out, so I just give a very short answer. 我举一个例子就好了。刚刚何老师的提问是关于一个好的宗教历史的写作者应该具备什么样的条件？ 在教会历史当中有一个非常重要的历史学者，叫做优西比乌 （Eusebius）。那中文的翻译叫做安瑟伯，或者是优西比乌，他是公元4世纪的教会历史学者。我们后代基督徒想要认识早期基督宗教历史当中正统信仰以及非正统信仰的文字资料，很多时候必须要仰赖这位优西比乌的作品。所以我很简短的回答，就是一个好的宗教历史的写作者，他一方面必须要有很好的阅读能力，同时他也必须要有很清楚的宗徒传统的精神，就是我刚刚所讲的这个 apostolic tradition， 他必须要很清楚知道教会的宗徒传承是什么。那第三个很重要的特征就是他必须要很开放，他对于不同的异端人士的文字，他仍然把它记下来。记下来的目的是为了要说明我们为什么不同意，而优西比乌的文字让我们后代的基督徒第一个知道我们到底遵守的这个信念是如何出来的。因为我们的确在古时候有其他的基督徒提出其他的看法，而很多人不同意。对于研究宗教历史，尤其是基督宗教历史的后代的人，这一种古代史料，也就是译者相同或者是相反，这些相反意见的人，他们到底说了什么，我们同样可以有资料可以去查。因为这些资料后来在历史的过程当中很多都湮灭了，所以一个好的宗教历史学者或者是作者，我觉得应该具有这3个特色。谢谢。
So I think to follow up on a lot of things that you've already said, you have to be very informed in order to be informative. And if I'll go and I'll think what the word history means, historia, it means investigation. And so it means that there is an element of interpretation. And you cannot provide that investigation and interpretation without being informed, without being inclusive, without thinking about your own biases, without putting yourself into it. And then this investigation and interpretation is something we can argue about that would make a good historical tradition of understanding history. And I think actually China is a very good example for that, because if we think about Sima Qian, the first grand historian, he was very much an interpreter. And although his heritage became the dynastic history, which we think about the most rigid imperial sanctioned form of writing the history of the previous dynasty based only on textual sources and only on far away sources later on, it was still very much interpretive, and there was a lot of space for interpretation. And so for me, the investigation and interpretation will be the most important things.
Okay, I probably have to close this discussion, but before that, I would propose under those discussion, I might sum up 3C as a content and the community and the context. For a writer of religious history, you've got to be a practitioner. You've got to know the content. The core of content is either God's will or Dharma, or the wisdom or the gospel. So we know the content, the core content. And we are practitioner because the level of your spirituality determines the level of the quality of the history, religious history. So it's determined by our spiritual quality and also the capability to be a transmitter or interpreter. We still mention the interpreter. Interpret the content to the community, to the individual in your community, for them to understand the core content of this specific religion. So we are practitioner for the content, and we are interpreter for the community. And then we are transmitter to the context, to engage in society, how our wisdom, gospel, or dharma helping and contribute your time and your society is very important. Is keep continuing living for the religion, also continue to cherish the value of religion. So we are practitioner for our core content. We are interpreter from the content to the community. We are transmitter for our religion to the society. I think we need both. So thank you all the discussion. I hope that our discussion were helpful for you to become a good writer, good interpreter, good practitioner, and good transmitter for the religion of history. Thank you all, thank you. Should we take a photo together? Okay.
Yes, please. 好, now we'd like to ask our Dharma masters to come on stage and we'll take a group photo. 好，那我们要请我们的金澈师父请上台跟我们的讲师一起拍个照。好，那 it's been a long day and I think everyone is quite it's been very attentive and thank you for everyone's participation. Step to the right, okay, sure. All right, look to our camera volunteer. 好，慈济. Okay, one more. 3, 2, 1, 慈济. Thank you very much, professors. 好，也感恩我们的师父还有和父。